Imagine this, a hidden government lab at the very tip of Long Island. Not just any lab, but one where the impossible might have happened. Where scientists and soldiers weren't simply testing weapons or radar systems. No, they were testing time itself. A place where they allegedly bent reality. Where people vanished, and sometimes returned. Where thoughts weren't just thoughts, they were dangerous. And where the US government didn't just monitor the skies, they were trying to monitor the fabric of time. We're talking about the Montauk Project. Yes, that Montauk, the one wrapped in whispers, urban legends, and reports that sound more like science fiction than history. But before you roll your eyes, hear this: Montauk Air Force Station was very real. Its concrete walls held radar systems built to detect Soviet bombers. And if you think that's all it was, well, some say the radar dish wasn't pointed at the horizon. It was pointed down, into a basement, into tunnels, into, who knows what. Dramatic pause, low ominous music. It was a rainy night in 1971, according to a so-called leaked security report, when a guard allegedly saw lights flickering underground, lights that shouldn't have existed. He reported strange humming equipment, a sensation that time itself had slowed, and then, just like that, it was gone. The report vanished, just like so many other traces of what supposedly went on at Montauk. We don't know if it was a glitch, paranoia, or something far stranger. But here's what we do know: people talk. Some remember experiments that sound impossible. Others swear they've glimpsed phenomena that defy explanation. And here's the kicker: when the project supposedly ended, the government didn't just close the doors. They erased it. As if Montauk never existed. Which brings us to the question that haunts anyone who dares to dig into this story. What really happened at Montauk? And why does it still whisper from the shadows of Long Island, decades later? Before we dive headfirst into psychic experiments and portals, or whatever you want to call them, we need to get grounded in reality. Because, yes, Montauk was real. Concrete, antennas, barbed wire, the whole Cold War shebang. Montauk Air Force Station was built in 1951, smack at the tip of Long Island. Its official job? Early warning radar. The Cold War was heating up, and the US needed eyes on the horizon. Soviet bombers were a serious threat, and Montauk's massive radar dish was supposed to see them coming before anyone else did. From the outside, it looked, well, kind of boring. Gray concrete, tall towers, a few scattered military buildings. You could almost call it picturesque, in a dystopian way. But according to locals, and you know how gossip tends to stretch facts, something was off. The radar dish wasn't always pointed at the sky. Sometimes, it was aimed at the ground. Tunnels ran beneath the base. Strange hums were heard at night. And guards reported seeing flashes of light, equipment operating when it shouldn't have been. One security officer, whose name has been redacted, or maybe just lost to time, wrote in his journal. "The machines, they don't look like they're measuring planes. Something else. Something wrong." Now, of course, that could have been paranoia. Military bases can be weird places at 3 a.m., the fluorescent lights, the echoing halls, the endless hum of generators. But that's the perfect setup for what comes next. Because when you mix Cold War paranoia with secret experiments, a little rumor can become a legend, and a legend can become, well, the Montauk Project. Pause, wind rises, ominous low music. And here's the kicker: Montauk wasn't operating in a vacuum. The US was already experimenting with psychic research. Programs like MKUltra and Project Stargate were testing mind control, drugs, and even remote viewing. The idea that Montauk could have been another branch, exploring time, consciousness, and dimensions, doesn't sound so impossible. When you consider the Cold War mindset, if you weren't ahead of the Soviets in every possible field, you were behind. And every possible field apparently included bending reality. So, yes. The base was real. The Cold War was real. And the paranoia was real. But what happened in the tunnels and labs beneath those radar dishes? That is where history gets murky. And our story gets strange. Now we step into the heart of the Montauk legend, the experiments themselves. And fair warning, this is where history starts to blend into, well, something else entirely. According to whistleblowers and a few very confident insiders, Montauk wasn't just a radar station. It was home to a secret program. Names like Project Pegasus or Project Phoenix get thrown around. And what they allegedly did there? Brace yourself. Time travel. Interdimensional portals. Psychic manipulation on human subjects. Yes, you heard that right. The government, they say, was attempting to bend the very fabric of reality. Leaked memos, at least, memos that have never been officially verified, describe a radar system designed to amplify psychic energy. Thoughts, emotions, memories, all supposedly harnessed as a kind of weapon. The idea was that if you could control or amplify the human mind, you could control more than soldiers, you could control time itself. One alleged technician, Preston Nichols, claimed that the Montauk equipment could focus a person's thoughts into a tangible field of energy. And sometimes, that energy would, well, escape. Objects would move. Lights would flicker. Guards reported distortions in time, clocks spinning backward, brief flashes of the future, people disappearing only to reappear minutes later. Now, before you dismiss all of this as sci-fi nonsense, consider this. There are multiple, independent accounts from former personnel, security guards, technicians, and scientists, all describing the same phenomena. Lights, machines, tunnels. Strange smells, unexplainable sensations. Not everyone claimed time travel, but almost everyone agreed that something unusual was happening underground. Some theorists suggest these experiments were a continuation of MKUltra, but on a much more ambitious scale. Drugs and hypnosis weren't enough, they wanted to manipulate space and time. And according to Nichols and other sources, Montauk became a playground for exactly that, bending reality, testing limits, and occasionally, creating problems they couldn't control. And here's where it gets truly strange. If reports are to be believed, by the early 1980s, Montauk had allegedly succeeded. Experiments reportedly allowed subjects to travel through time and even interact with future or past events. Which raises a question that keeps historians, skeptics, and conspiracy theorists awake at night. If you could send a human forward, or backward, through time, what would happen to them? And more importantly, why hasn't anyone talked about it openly, until decades later? Now, things get, well, weird. Really weird. According to Preston Nichols and other whistleblowers, one experiment in the early 1980s went horrifyingly wrong. The Montauk Project wasn't just about controlling minds anymore, it was about amplifying consciousness to unimaginable levels. And sometimes, consciousness has a, let's say, messy side. Imagine a subject, tired, overstimulated, fully focused, sitting in the psychic amplification chair. Their thoughts, fears, and subconscious emotions are being projected and magnified by a massive radar dish. Sounds like science fiction, right? But what allegedly happened next, might make you question your sanity. One night, Nichols claims, the subject's deepest fears somehow manifested physically. A creature formed. Clawed. Shifting. Unstable. And it wasn't real, in a traditional sense, it was a psychic projection made tangible. Guards panicked. Alarms screamed. The base went into full lockdown. Technicians scrambled to regain control. And according to Nichols, they barely managed to contain it before it could, well, escape. Some reports even suggest the creature, or rather, the psychic anomaly, left traces, scorch marks, damaged equipment, and lingering energy fields that no one could explain. And here's the thing, multiple sources describe similar incidents. Not always monsters, but bizarre, violent phenomena. Lights flickering, objects moving, people vanishing for short periods. The experiments weren't entirely consistent, but that's part of what makes Montauk. Montauk. Now, skeptics will say, of course there's a monster story, it's the 80s, Long Island, secret military base. People love to embellish. Sure, maybe. But when independent accounts all describe the same type of events, lights, machines, anomalies, panic, it's hard to ignore completely. And the real kicker? By the time the base was shut down in 1981, insiders claim many experiments had already been erased. Records burned. Equipment dismantled. Witnesses silenced, or at least, carefully guided on what to say. So here's what we're left with: a military base, a psychic experiment gone wrong, and stories of creatures that weren't entirely normal. Whether you call it science, paranoia, or plain old fiction, Montauk had crossed a line between reality and imagination. And, as always, the question lingers: what happened deep underground that night? Did anyone, or anything, survive it? If you thought things couldn't get any stranger, buckle up. Because Montauk allegedly didn't stop at monsters or psychic projections. No, according to whistleblowers, the base went a step further. Way further. They were experimenting with time travel. Yes, time travel. As in, sending humans forward or backward through time, using the radar as a sort of temporal amplifier. Sounds impossible. Sure. But remember, this was the Cold War. And when paranoia meets unlimited funding, the rules of physics apparently become optional. Some former participants claim they were actually transported to other years. One man allegedly said he traveled to the year 2137 and witnessed a world ruled by artificial intelligence. Another claimed he was sent to the 1600s, watching history unfold firsthand, invisible and untouchable. Sound cue, brief flash of electrical discharge, low whoosh. Of course, the tricky part here, there's no concrete evidence. No photos, no physical traces, no time-traveling tourists handing out souvenirs. Just memories. And as we know, memory can be flexible. Especially after decades of trauma, suggestion, or just really vivid imagination. But proponents argue there's a pattern. Multiple, independent witnesses describe the same apparatus, the same procedures, even the same sensations during these experiments. Electric hums, tunnel vibrations, a tingling that ran through the body as if reality itself were stretching and folding. And here's the thing, whether it actually worked or not is almost secondary. The very attempt to manipulate time reveals the mindset at Montauk. The government wasn't content to monitor the world, they wanted to control reality itself. Some skeptics point out, if anyone actually succeeded in time travel, why haven't they come back and stopped the Cold War, or warned us about the future? Fair question. Maybe they did. Maybe history is just too complicated for anyone to notice. Or maybe, we're looking at memory, myth, and paranoia, all tangled together in the shadow of a secretive military base. Whatever the truth, the time travel claims cement one undeniable fact: Montauk wasn't an ordinary base. It was a place where the boundaries between science, imagination, and sheer audacity were tested, and sometimes, allegedly, broken. And now, as the base closed and records disappeared, the experiments faded from official history, but not from legend. By 1981, Montauk Air Force Station officially closed. And when I say, officially, I mean the government locked the doors, stripped the equipment, and, according to some accounts, erased all evidence that anything unusual had ever happened. Trucks left under cover of night. Equipment dismantled or destroyed. Records either vanished or were redacted beyond recognition. Locals reported seeing military personnel sealing tunnels with concrete, as if trying to bury the base's secrets, literally underground. And here's the thing, witnesses who tried to dig into the archives often hit dead ends. Files lost. Memos never existed. Researchers who asked questions were either stonewalled or quickly told to move along. The official story? Montauk was just a radar station. The extraordinary claims. Classified. Some former insiders suggest this was no ordinary shutdown. They claim the experiments had reached a point the government couldn't risk. Psychic phenomena too unstable. Time travel too unpredictable. Anomalies too dangerous. So the Montauk project was quietly terminated, but not before every trace of it was scrubbed. And the psychological impact. According to accounts from technicians and guards, many suffered long-term trauma. Some reported lingering visions, strange auditory experiences, even sensations that reality itself had shifted. And, of course, Preston Nichols and a handful of others kept talking. Their stories became the foundation of Montauk lore, whispered in the shadows, fueling decades of speculation. The end of Montauk wasn't just a physical shutdown. It was a cover-up of legend, a systematic erasure of a base where minds, machines, and perhaps time itself were pushed to the limits. And yet, Montauk never truly disappeared. Stories survived. Memories lingered. And the mystery remained, beckoning curious minds to investigate, and wonder. Because here's the haunting part, whether or not time travel happened, whether monsters really manifested, whether psychic energy bent reality, the questions themselves survived. And in some ways, they're more intriguing than any answer could ever be. So, after all that, what do we make of Montauk? Was it a top-secret military experiment gone rogue? A hub of psychic research and time travel? Or just a collection of overactive imaginations, rumors, and Cold War paranoia? The truth is, we don't really know. And maybe that's exactly the point. Montauk straddles a line between reality and legend, a place where the ordinary and the extraordinary collided in ways we can barely comprehend. We have reports of monsters, portals, and men who supposedly traveled through time. We have whispers of cover-ups, erased records, and tunnels filled with humming machinery. And yet, no one can definitively prove it happened. No photographs, no physical artifacts, no time-traveling witnesses showing up at the local diner with tales of the future. But here's the thing, maybe Montauk doesn't need proof to be fascinating. Maybe the legend survives because it taps into something fundamental, our curiosity, our fear, and our desire to imagine what lies beyond the limits of science, morality, and even reality itself. And as we step away from the empty radar towers, the abandoned concrete halls, the wind-whipped cliffs of Long Island, we're left with questions that linger like shadows. Did the Montauk Project really bend time? Did the experiments create phenomena too dangerous to contain? Or is this simply the Cold War's most elaborate story, crafted from paranoia, ambition, and human imagination? Whatever the answer, one thing is certain, Montauk remains a mystery. A story that refuses to die. And maybe, just maybe, that's how all legends should be. Music swells to a cinematic peak, then fades to soft, suspenseful hum. So the next time someone tells you that time travel, psychic experiments, or government monsters are impossible, remember, history sometimes hides its strangest secrets where we least expect them. Stay curious. Stay skeptical. And keep looking, because Montauk might just be watching. In short, Montauk wasn't just a military base. It was, according to insiders, a laboratory for the unimaginable. And whether you believe it or not, the stories that emerge from this place are as chilling as they are fascinating.